Hey, my name's Izzy. This is Rolling Virtual Cards coming at you with another Commander deck build. Month of Atraxa for February. I am a few days late, obviously. It's the 4th. As I record this won't be coming out to the 5th. So I'm going to catch up. I only made 28 decks because I didn't realize it was a leap year. But that's a lot. I made 28 Atraxa Praetor's Voice, the original Atraxa. Just to show you why she's the most popular commander and why I think she will always be the most popular commander of all time. She's great. I have a newfound love for her. I understand why a lot of people hate her because she can be certain things, but she can be a lot of fun with so many different ways. And as long as they keep pushing different forms of counters, you're going to see a lot of different versions of her going around. So let's get into the first one. You know it, you love it. Atraxa +1/+1 counters. This one's simple, easy to get ahead of. That being said, one last little catch up here. You will get other videos throughout the, here's my cat, guys, through the month. But I'm hoping to hit Atraxa once a day, including a few extra probably on Monday just so that I can catch up. So since I made 28, I'm on the 4th, and I have one extra day. You'll see, it'll be the 5th tomorrow. You'll see 4 tomorrow, I'm hoping. Or like 2 tomorrow. I'll probably just do 2 a day until I catch up. But yeah, let's get into it. Atraxa Praetor's Voice is a green, a white, a blue, and a black for a 4/4 legendary creature, Angel Horror, with flying, vigilance, death touch, lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step, proliferate. Let's just get into it. This video might be a little longer than the rest because it's the first one of Atraxa, and I just want to explain why it's so good. Simply put, it's a proliferator. Every end step you proliferate, so every counter on any permanent or player, you can tick it up once. This is fantastic because any deck that wants to run counters, you get to proliferate at the end step. That's just useful. Whether it's poison counters or 1/1 +1/+1 counters or -1/-1 counters or energy counters or super friend counters like planeswalker counters, anything. If it's a counter that's on a permanent, you can add another one. Super useful in so many ways, okay? That's what's so great about it. On the second part of this, the flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink is insane. Flying is the blue, vigilance is the green, death touch is the black, and lifelink is the white. That's just each one falling in line. And here's the thing. Atraxa has this really neat thing about accidental life gain. Just like Aloro or any other commander that has lifelink or some form of life gain that just happens, 4 extra life every single turn is insane once your commander's out. You get Atraxa out and you're hitting someone, you're gaining 4 life. It's a blocker, so no one's going to come hitting you because it's got vigilance. So you're going to hit them, you can block their flyers. It's a 4/4, so it doesn't just die to like a lightning bolt or accidental damage here or there. Good luck killing it with an Orcish Bowmaster. It's just strong. And because Atraxa wants to be killed, you run some stuff to protect her and your friends so it doesn't die. It's very simplistic commander, does what it says, and there's so many different ways to build it, and I hope you understand that from this month. So let's get into why would you want to do +1/+1 counters. Because that's got the most support. Out of every other counter imaginable, +1/+1 counters has the most support, the most cards that draw you stuff, the most cards that ramp you, the most cards that give you interaction with your opponent, but still do +1/+1 stuff. Plus, the +1/+1 counters will help you win overall by buffing your entire team, including Atraxa. So let's get into the card by card. First off, the +1/+1 counters. There's 31 of them. Let's get into them. Hardened Scales. This is just going to add an extra +1/+1 counter. So when you proliferate everything, since you're proliferating an additional 1/1 counter on it, it'll be 2 1/1 counters. Hopeful Initiate. This one allows you to, this one has training. So when it attacks, let me double check that. If I go to view details, it should have it here. Training. Whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So if you attack with it and Atraxa, you'll put a 1/1 counter on it, and that'll go for a while. So from 1 to 2, and then 2 to 3, and then 3 to 4. and then it'll be done. Although with the proliferating with Atraxa, it'll go 1 to 2, and then you proliferate it to 3, and the next time you'll make it 4, and then you can proliferate it to 5. Anyway, for 2 and a white, you can remove 2 1/1 counters from among creatures you control to destroy a target artifact or enchantment, and that is at instant speed. With how many 1/1 counters you're spreading around with Atraxa, proliferating them all, this is just a great way to pay 3 and get rid of a problematic artifact or enchantment. Wizard class, no maximum hand size is fantastic. Being able to draw 2 cards for 3 mana is great, or I guess for 4 mana total is great. And lastly, for 5 more mana here, a total of 9 mana. Whenever you draw a card, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. This is just a 1/1 counter every single turn on something. And most of the time, you're putting in an Atraxa or something, or a creature that doesn't have it, so Atraxa can start proliferating. And why would you put it in Atraxa? Commander damage and life gain. Benevolent Hydra. This comes in with X 1/1 counters on it, and then it also adds an additional 1/1 counter if one would be put on, and you can tap it to remove a counter from it and put a 1/1 counter on a creature control. So noted, this is a 1/1, unlike some Hydras who are 0/0s. So you can cast this where X is 0, and then just play it for 2 to be a 2-drop Hardened Scales. On the other side, if you put 5 into X, you can tap it to remove a counter to put a counter on something else. So a creature that doesn't have it can get a counter, and then Atraxa can get a counter, and that'll actually be 2 counters on them. And then Atraxa can proliferate at the end step, always keeping Benevolent Hydra at 2 counters, because if a 1/1 counter would put on, so it's on another creature you control. So you're not doubling the counters on him when you're using Atraxa, but you are putting at least 1, so you can constantly use the tap ability every single turn to put 2 counters onto something. And a third with Atraxa, I guess, technically, at the end step. So very strong card in this deck to just get stuff really big. Conclave Mentor, this is great. This is just another additional 1/1 counters on stuff. And then if it dies, you gain life equal to its power. So you kind of want to keep putting counters on this. The reason being is because then if someone wants to kill it, if it's at like 20, because she has 18 counters, or is at 15, you're going to give him 15 life. So people are going to second guess, like, actually, let's not kill it, unless it's going to kill me, because I don't want you to gain 15 life. That's dangerous, right? And the reason stuff like Benevolent Hydra and Conclave Mentor works so well in decks like this, and other creatures that are going to be adding additional 1/1 counters, whereas some decks you're running it just because you really need to get that like additional 1/1 counters on everything. This one, it works because they're going to get big themselves, so then they can run into stuff. As long as they get at least 1/1 counter on them somehow, Atraxa can just keep getting them big each turn. And with them, that's going to double them. And this is on a creature you control. So unlike Benevolent Hydra, if you put a 1/1 counter on it, you will get 2. So Incubation Druid taps for any color, but if it has a 1/1 counter on it, it taps for 3 of any color. And you can adapt it 3 and 2 blue to put 3 1/1 counters on it, which is good, making it a 3/5 that can tap for 3 mana, which is really strong in this deck. Ozolith, the Shattered Spire, it again adds an additional 1/1 counter if you would put one on. You can pay 1 in a blue to tap it to put a 1/1 counter on an artifact or creature you control. And you can cycle it for 2, so if you really need that card draw, you can do that. But again, this is just a nice way to just, hey, I'm going to put a 1/1 counter on my Conclave, so now it's going to get bigger and bigger every single rotation. And with this, again, you'll put 2, so by tapping it for 1 in a green and putting a 1/1 counter on, like something like a Conclave, you'll put 2 on it. But Conclave is going to make it an additional 1, so that's going to be 3 counters onto it. Very strong, continuously doing that. Steelbind Hydra comes in with X 1/1 counters on it, and you can pay 2 in a green to remove a 1/1 counter from it to pop an artifact or enchantment. Great removal. Still gets really big. Branched Evolution is going to add twice the 1/1 counters, and the way this works, to explain with Conclave and this, so if you choose how it goes. So if you're going to put a 1/1 counter, you normally want to add and then multiply. So if you add it to 2, you make it to 4. Whereas if you multiply to 2 and add, you get to 3. So always add it and then multiply it. So since this adds twice the number of 1/1 counters, you want to add and then multiply. So this is great. If it's just 1/1 counter, it's the only thing on the field. It's just going to add a second one. But very strong enchantment. Breathe the Hunt is going to give you a 1/1 counter whenever a creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. Or sorry, it's going to draw you a card whenever a creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it deals damage to an opponent. That's great. Just a great card draw. Everything's going to have 1/1 counters in this deck. Drina, the Demigorg, is great because it's a 1/3 flyer, so it's going to be able to hit people. It's going to get big with the 1/1 counters. And then when a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than another of your opponents, the attacking player draws a card, and you put 2 1/1 counters on a creature control. So the way this works is you've got 3 opponents. If player A attacks player B, like if they're at like 40, 39, or 40, 30, and 20. If the 20 player attacks the 40 player, he's good. If the or the 30 player, because it attacks an opponent who has more life than another of your opponents. So the 20 player can attack either. The 30 player can attack the 40, and the 40 player can attack the 30. Because as long as they at least have one, they have at least more mana than one of the opponents. And this is great because you're going to be putting 2 1/1 counters on creature control. Yes, they get a draw, but this is pushing them to attack your opponents, which can help you win in the long run. And putting the 2 1/1 counters on a creature, including like itself, is great. There's a lot of weird hug cards in this deck because they just happen to work pretty well. Champion of Lambhalt is fine. Creatures with power less than it can't block creatures you control. So once it gets to like a 10/10, no one can block it. No one can block creatures. And then whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you put a 1/1 counter on this card. Chasm Skulker. Whenever you draw a card, you put a 1/1 counter on it, and when it dies, you make X blue squid, 1/1 blue squids, where X is the number of 1/1 counters on it. So when this gets to like 20 counters on it or 10 counters, no one wants to kill it because 10 1/1s with Island Walk aren't fun to deal with, especially if you all of a sudden put a bunch of 1/1 counters on them. Fertilid, it's a 2/3, comes down with 2 counters, and you can pay 1 into green to remove a counter and find a basic land to put it on the battlefield tapped. This works so well with Atraxa because you can keep those 1/1 counters on it so that you can continuously remove them and do that. And that is not once per turn. Target players, and so with Atraxa and some doublers or some additional 1/1 counters, you can get a lot of basic lands out of the field quickly. Glunch the Bestower. It's a 0/5 with flying, but when at the beginning of your instep you choose a player, that player puts 2 1/1 counters of creature control. Choose a second player to draw a card and choose a third player to make 2 treasure tokens. You're being friendly, except to the person you don't want to. If you need to draw a card, go ahead and draw. If you need mana, go ahead and get that mana. Otherwise, put the 2 1/1 counters on like your commander, and all of a sudden she's got 2, maybe 3. If with branching, it's 4. You can get some pretty ridiculous results with Glunch. Inspiring Call is great. You just draw a card for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter, and it gives them all indestructible. Kami of Whispering Hopes is great because it's gonna again gonna do that additional 1/1 counter on a permanent. But it taps for X is its power. So as long as you get it bigger by putting a 1/1 counter and keep proliferating, it's gonna tap for a lot of mana. Rishkar Pima Renegade is gonna add 2 1/1 counters, 1 onto 2 different creatures. And then creatures with 1/1 counters tap for a green. That's just great ramp there. Tribute to the World Tree is a fun card. So if a creature enters the battlefield, if they have power 3 or greater, you draw a card. Otherwise, you put 2 1/1 counters. So if it's a 0 power, it's going to come out as a 2/2 or with a 2+1 counters. So it'll have 2 power. If it's a 1, it'll come out with 3 power. And if it's 2, it comes out with 4 power. Otherwise, if it's big, you just draw a card. So there's no downside to this card, other than the fact that it's got 3 mana, 3 green pips. Unbreakable Formation is going to make all your creatures indestructible. And if it happens to be your main phase, you put a 1/1 counter on each of those creatures and give them Vigilance. Great way to push out for a win. Especially if you have a bunch of these additional 1/1 counters, and all of a sudden the 1+1+1 counter is like 5 1/1 counters, and they all have indestructible and Vigilance, so you just swing out. Corpse Jackman is just, again, twice as many 1/1 counters on a creature. Fathom Mage is going to be evolving, so whenever a creature with more power or toughness comes into the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on it, and whenever it gets a 1/1 counter, you draw a card. So that means that your instep, when you proliferate, you draw a card. And when a 1/1 counter is put on it. So with that additional 1/1 counter, you draw for each 1/1 counter on it, which is great. Faladar Retreat's either going to get you a 2/2 Cat Beast when a land enters the battlefield, or you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control, and they gain Vigilance. So, again, both great. That +1/+1 counter is doing, like, Unbreakable, minus the Indestructible. And if someone board wipes, it just helps you rebuild the field. Forgotten Agent's so good. So it gets a 1/1 counter whenever a player casts a spell, and that's a player casts any type of spell. And then at your upkeep, you can move any number of 1/1 counters from Forgotten Agent onto any other creatures. So you can move like 1 over here, 2 over here, 3 over here, just moving them all over. And what's great is with all these additional 1/1 counters and stuff on people, that's going to keep like adding up to all of them. And then you can just swing out for game. Linor, Autumn, Sovereign. At the beginning of your combat, you put a 1/1 counter on a creature. Then if you control 3 creatures with different powers, you draw a card. You're going to normally be drawing a card each turn with this, and that additional 1/1 counter counts. Toothy, Imaginary Friend, works with another card that you'll see in a second. Peer, Imaginative Rascal. So this is strict 1/1 counters. So when you draw a card, you put a 1/1 counter on it, and then when it dies, you draw that many. You draw cards equal to the number of 1/1 counters on it. Again, gross. Eventually, this guy's like 15, 20 counters on it, and no one wants to kill it. You kill it because it's dangerous, but then I'm gonna draw so many cards, it doesn't matter. Over here we get Cathar's Crusade. This is a card I normally do not like playing. It's very complicated to keep heads up on when you're making tokens and stuff, but when a creature enters the battlefield, you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. When you make like 3 tokens and then you make another 2 tokens, they're all entering with different 1/1 counters. It makes keeping track of it on paper very hard, but it's good. It's really good. This just buffs so many things. You cast like 2 or 3 creatures and everything's huge with all these additional 1/1 counters, and you just win the game. Shabraz the Sky Shark is such a fun card to run. It's a shark bird, but it's a 3/3. It's got flying, and when you draw a card, you put a 1/1 counter on it, and you gain life. So it's got that accidental life gain, which we love, keeping you alive every time you draw a card. But also a target human gains flying until end of turn. So if you've got like a decent human like this guy or this wizard, or I don't know if there's like a lot of humans. So the champion, not that the champion really needs that, but if you got some random humans on the field, here's a human, you can just give them flying for 1. That's not bad. Easy way to get in. But it's gonna get big and it's gonna gain you life. So I like it. Plus it's got the flying. Shadrach's Silver Quill. Again, this is another one of those like kind of a hug card. So it's a 2/5 with flying and double strike, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may choose 2. Each mode must target a different player. So target player gets a 2/1 white-black inkling creature token with flying. Target player draws a card and loses 1 life. Target player puts a 1/1 counter on each creature they control. Normally you're choosing that one. 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Boom. With all the additionals, you're getting like 3 or 4 1/1 counters on everything, including it. And like double strike, 4/1 counters. It's a 6. That's 12 damage out there. Your commander's a 4. He gets 4 counters. All of a sudden, it's 8 damage out there. It gets insane each turn. If you really need to draw the cards, you can go for that. And if you want the little like flyer because you want to rebuild, this is another card that just can help you rebuild. Someone board wipes, you go Shadrax. You just make the 2/1s each turn. Let someone else put 1/1 counters on their creatures, or like draw a card if they're like the one behind. You can be friendly with them. Bane of Progress hits the field, wipes the board of artifacts and enchantments, and gets a 1/1 counter for each permanent destroyed. Comes out huge. Great board wipe as a retort. Someone blows your creatures up, you go Bane of Progress, pop all the artifacts and enchantments on the field, because you only blew up all the creatures, right? And then it comes out as like everyone's got like 3, let's say, including you. That's 12. So it's going to come out as a 14/14. That's gross. Prime Speaker Zagana comes in with where X is the greatest creature, with X 1/1 counters where X is the greatest power, other creatures you control, and since you were going big over wide, you're going tall instead of wide, you're gonna like love this. This is gonna hit the field, you're gonna have like a 20/20, boom, 21/1 counters, you're gonna draw 21 cards, and then you're just not gonna lose. Spark Doubler's abilities. This comes in the field as a copy as your commander. That gives you 2 proliferations. That's so much doublations. Plus, it comes with an additional 1/1 counter on it, which is gross. You can choose other stuff. I've had it like come in as Prime Speaker Zagana to draw a bunch of cards. You can have it come in as Shadrax if you really need that. Any of these creatures really do just love that. But coming in as your commander, having 2 Atraxas, 2 things hitting people, gaining life, it's gross. I love it. ETBs, quick ETBs. The ones we've gone over. We went over all these except for this one. Was this? Is this not? Oh, this is not. That's funny. Now it's there. So this one costs X less, where X is the greatest power among the creatures you control. Normally this is 2 green. If you are building back up or it's early, your commander reduces it by 4. So instead of 7, generic, you're only paying 3 generic, so 5 total. But it's expensive. It's a card I really suggest you proxy, because I'm totally for proxying cards that are like expensive. But I like it in this deck as a proxy. I don't normally run it in most decks, but this one you're using everything. You're using the 2 mana, you're using the life gain, accidental life gain, because those are both great, but you're also using the 1/1 counters, okay? Those 1/1 counters are fantastic. You're also using the draw. So most decks use all this except for the 1/1 counters. They're like, okay, cool, my creature's slightly bigger. But on here, you're proliferating that. And that's where I'm like, the Great Hinge is fantastic in Atraxa, because those 1/1 counters will become 2 1/1 counters and 3. And it's such a good card in and out of itself. I don't think cards should be price pointed out of people's ability to use them. It's why I'm completely fine with people proxying stuff. You know, as long as you can tell me what it does. So if you're not, like, if you write the Great Hinge and you don't know what it does, like, I don't like it. But if you can write all the stuff on the card, or you want to print a copy, I don't care, do it. ETB enablers, this enables the ETB because it copies stuff, whatever it is. And champion is like the finisher because it makes sure no one can block it. There's a few other finishers, like Cathar's Crusade can be considered one, but like it requires more setup. This one just needs to be on the field. Ramp. Here's some ramp. We got 17 of it. We'll go over quickly. Birds taps for any color. Wayfarers grabs you a basic. Arcane Signet caps for any color. You're gonna notice in all these Atraxa decks, I don't run Soul Ring. I do not run Soul Ring if it doesn't help me cast my commander. It doesn't. If my commander is 4 colored pips, I cannot use it to get my commander out. My commander doesn't have an ability that it's useful for. It's gone. It's not in any of these decks. It's not necessary. I don't like Soul Ring in commander decks that require that it doesn't help. I'll run Soul Ring if it has 1 colorless pip, but not if it's just all color. Farseek's gonna grab me a plains, island, swamp, not a mountain, but one of the 3, which is great. Felwar Stone is taps for any color my opponents can produce. Grey Saga, it has evolved and it taps for green for each 1/1 counter on it. Incubation Druid taps for any color, and if it has a 1/1 counter, taps for 3 of any color. Rampant Growth grabs me basic. Command Sphere taps for any color, and you can sack and draw a card. Cultivate and Kodama's Reach grabs you 2 basics, 1 onto the field, tapped, 1 into your hand. Fertilid we went over. Glutch we went over. Kami and Rishkar we went over. Smothering Tide, this card you will see kind of in this deck. It's an expensive card, so I don't normally like it. So as I went along, I tried to find other things that you didn't have to run with it. You can totally replace this with any other ramp spell. But in this one, I decided to run it in here. It's a good card. It's another card I suggest proxying because it's over 20 bucks. Honestly, if the card's over $10, just proxy it. Like, play within your means. If $10 is nothing to you, go ahead and buy the $10 card at your local store. Support them, right? It's why I say I don't like buying stuff online because I want to support my local store. So if you have a local store, support them. Buy the card if you find it, right? But if you need it to build a deck, proxy it, and once it's there, maybe purchase it. See if you can get it, trade some cards in, support your stores, okay? That's where I am with buying singles, okay? Not buying online. Otherwise, proxy. And then the Great Hinge is ramp because it taps for 2. This one produces a treasure whenever your opponent draws a card. They have to pay 2. Generic, if they can't, you make a treasure. So it's a good treasure. So every one of these decks has basically the same land. I just used the generic package here and then fixed it up, cleaned it up a bit. It's 33 lands in each deck for the most part. This one I added like a different one and removed it. Like Gavany Township is one I'll talk about here. For 2 a white and a green and a white, you can put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control, which is great. Other than that, the rest is just generic land stuff. That's useful. Additional accidental life gain, you got 2 Heliod and Shabraz. This should be with the +1/+1 counters. I don't know why it wasn't. So yeah, the way this one works is it's get it indestructible, and as long as your devotion to white is less than 5, it's a creature. It isn't a creature. And then whenever you gain life, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control or enchantment you control, which means itself usually. But the cool thing is your commander has life gain, so it hits, you gain life. And 1 in a white, another target creature you control gains life gain, so you can add that more additional life gain if you accidental life gain if you need to. And then on top of that, each one that you give it to is going to trigger its ability. And then we went over to Bras. There is a combo in the deck. I am running Walking Ballista, which again is a 1/1 counter. It should be over there, and it's interaction, so that's good. So Walking Ballista is 2x, and it comes into the battlefield with X1 counters, and for 4 you put a 1/1 counter on it, and you can remove a 1/1 counter to deal a damage to target creature player. Heliod, the way this works, it's one of the most well-known combos in the game of Magic at this point. I think it's even ran in most formats that are where it's legal. But for 1 and a white, you give it lifelink. So then when you ping something, you remove a 1/1 counter to ping someone, you gain life, which then you put the 1/1 counter on Walking Ballista. You just need to pay 4 for Walking Ballista because it needs to have at least 1/1 counter on it. It needs to have 2, so when you remove it, it doesn't instantly die. So you remove 1, it's got the 1/1, it's a 1/1 now, and you ping someone, you gain the life, and you just go in for the deck. So you could technically pay 2 and then pay 4 to put a counter on it. I don't know why you would do it that way though. So very good combo. Otherwise, they're both good cards in the first place because it's a 1/1 counter deck, and this is good removal. Counters. These are cards that are 1/1 counters, but they aren't just. Ooh, this is not a counters. This is meant to be a +1/+1 counter. I clicked the wrong button. There we go. I'll go back to him. I did not mean to just shove him up there and forget about him. Should have went over him first, but there we go. Managorge Hydra. When a player casts a spell, you put a 1/1 counter on it. It's just like this guy, except it has trample, so you can kill someone with it pretty fast. And I think it's also only opponents. But the counter cards here work for any counters, not just 1/1 counters. So Winding Constrictor, whenever 1 or more counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, that many +1. And if you would get a counter, you get that many +1. That works for energies, but it also works for poison, so this does have a double-edged sword. If you happen to be going against someone who's running poison counters, they'll double the poison counters on you, which is dangerous. Lazel Valkith's Champion. If 1 or more counters would be put on a creature or planeswalker you control, twice that many. Or an additional 1. Peer does... is an additional... Yeah. Yeah, that many +1. So it's another additional 1 for any counter. If you can hear that noise back there, it's my cat playing with her ball. Spinny thing. Takuthol doubles proliferate. So if you proliferate twice, this just works so well with Atraxa. It's a Phyrexian horror too, just like Atraxa is, which is so fun. I love that this is just buddies with Atraxa. It's like, yeah, you want to proliferate? Let's do it twice. And the proliferations are 2 different triggers. So all the 1/1 counter additions, like if you have 2 +1/+1 counter additional counters and a doubler, you go proliferate. That's 1 +1/+1 counter, which you'd add to 3 and double to 6, and then you would do it again. So that's a total of 12. Doubling Season doubles it twices any tokens that you would create and any counters. And then Vorinclex does the same as Doubling Season, except for only counters, and it makes it so that your opponent's counters are halved, which means if it rounded down. So if they would put a half counter on it, it goes to 0, which is very good. Damaging is great. This is just Lion Sash. You remove a count. You pay a white, exile target card from a graveyard, and if it's a permanent, you put a counter on him, and then you can reconfigure this for 2 onto a creature, and they get +1/+1 for each 1 counter on him, which is great because he can get big, and then you can go swing kills. Faye, I love you. Please stop playing with the ball. See if she can stop here. Okay. I got her to stop. I don't mean to be mean to my cat. So, I'll let her play with it in a bit. Dusk Legion, Duelist here we haven't gone over. If 1 or more 1/1 counters we put it on it, you draw a card. This ability triggers once each turn. So as long as you get a 1/1 counter on it, as long as you proliferate it each turn, it's a draw card each turn. A draw each turn. This one has cycle, so it's technically draw. We went over Breed. Let's see any of these. Armcraft Druid. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card for each 1/1 counter on a creature you control. I gotta put 1/1. It's technically not 1/1 counters, but it cares about them, so that works. Yeah, so enters the battlefield, just draw a bunch of cards. We went over. Yep, we went over all those. This one gives evasion. Interaction. Let's go over some more here. Path and Swords pops exile as a creature. Counter spell, counter something. Heroic Intervention gives all your permanents indestructible and hexproof. Lion Sass is interaction because it exiles a creature or a card from a graveyard. Scathing Ooze is the same thing, and I meant to put this in 1/1 counters as well. It's great because it gets bigger and bigger with 1/1 counters, and since it's adding that one, it gets pretty big fast. But over that, Beast and Generous Gift, you might see them in some of the decks. There were ones I started removing in the future, but they pop any permanent and give them a 3/3, which isn't bad. And we talked about Bane. Monoseek, this is one of the few. Did I not put this? No, it's not in 1/1 counters. I don't know why it wasn't there anyway. But yeah, this one gives all your stuff protection. Yeah, it's a protection. But yeah, this gives all your planeswalkers you control and other creatures have hexproof. But on top of that, for 4 and 2 green, you can just put a 1/1 counter on creature control. On each creature you control, which is just really good. Again, just a strong choice. Very useful. And you can just sync that. If you have 12 mana, you could do it twice. Protection, we went over most of these. These are the two I haven't. Lightning Greaves gives your creature Shroud and Haste, and Swift Boots gives them Hexproof and Haste. These are going to be in like every single one of these decks because we need to protect Atraxa. Smothering Tithe is technically a stacks piece. These are the token generators, but they also all do 1/1 counter stuff, and that's my one wipe. So yeah, that's the deck. That's the 1/1 counter deck. You'd want to run this deck with Atraxa this way and in this 1/1 counter form because, like, it's, again, it just has the most decisions or the most support. There are so many cards, other cards you could add, remove, that are just fun. It has an easy combo that you could grab. That's a 2-card combo if you run into it. You can add and remove cards. It's a fun deck, and I highly suggest taking a look at it. Atraxa just does it so well. In so many ways, and she just has so many other things going for her. The reasons you might not want to run the 1/1 counter deck is because it's a 1/1 counter deck. Like, it's like nothing special. It's a 1/1 counter deck. Good job, guys. You did your thing. You put 1/1 counters on stuff and made them big. But they're going to continue to push 1/1 counters because it's such a universal theme that you will always get more support. You can always look forward to at least like 1 card per set talking about 1/1 counters. So, with that being said, look forward to the month of Atraxa here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Peace.